So I have Pam Webster with me today, one of the founders of Kinma School back in 1971. And I wanted to kick off the questions, Pam, just asking you, what led you to start the school way back in 1971?
Well, that's an interesting question, Amy. There were actually several reasons that led me to thinking about education. I guess the bottom line is the first thing was that I was a baby boomer, and baby boomers of my generation, the schools and preschools hadn't really geared themselves up yet. And so people were saying to me, when Robin was born, you must book her into a school. I thought this was ridiculous, but I started looking at preschools and schools at that point in time. The second reason was that I was actually a high school teacher, and I was teaching at Forest High, and I went back teaching just one day a week when Robin was about a year old. And to my absolute horror, I realised that children, when they got to year 7, bright, lovely children in year 7, were trained, if you like, to do what the teacher wanted them to do. They'd lost their creativity. When I was training to be a teacher, the thing that we were taught was that we needed to make sure that that children were learning through discovery, and it certainly wasn't happening. So I decided I needed to look for something where this could actually be put into practice.
I know you didn't have much support back then, you didn't have any family locally, so what gave you the energy to start the school?
Well, once you've made a decision in your life to do something, you do it. Gil and I were very keen to start schools. I'd had a good schooling experience myself, but Gil had not had such a good one. And we decided together that we would put our energies into doing that as well as having our family.
You obviously felt quite passionate about the educational process. What types of educational philosophies informed your decisions about Kinma?
Well, when I was looking around at schools, I looked at all sorts of different schools. I looked at the Steiner method, and I found a school called Umbilico that was operating in Gordon at the time, and it was following a progressive education philosophy. And I went and visited, and it just seemed to me it was exactly the right thing to do.
Once you decided to do it, what happened next?
Oh, well, that was interesting. We basically, I wrote out typed out a little notice and put it around the shopping centres and said anyone who was interested in starting a progressive school could contact me, and I had 4 people who contacted me. We had a little meeting. We decided to print 1,000 leaflets and put them into letterboxes, and we called a meeting in my house on the 22nd of October 1971, and that was the beginning.
And what types of decisions did you have to make around setting up the school and the way it was going to be structured?
Well, when we had our meeting and we got together a core group of people who were very keen to start the school, we were very lucky. We had an accountant, we had a solicitor, we had lots of very keen people, and our solicitor, who was a parent, advised us to set up a company limited by guarantee, and that's how we went about it.
So what happened next after you got those people sort of on board?
Okay. So after this other public meeting, we set up an interim group to set the school up. Originally, I had thought we would start the school in 1973, giving us a year and a bit to start, but people were so keen that we ended up deciding that it was going to start in February 1972, and it did.
And how did you find this beautiful setting for the school up here in Terrey Hills?
Well, originally we started in a hall in Forestville, and it was awful because we had to pack everything up at the end of every day. The children couldn't carry on and have continuity from day to day because everything had to be packed up at the end of the day. So we quickly looked for another building. We found that the autistic school had moved to Cook Street into new premises, so we went and knocked on the door of the house that they had been in previously in Parenti Road in Belrose, and we asked the people would they like to move if we could find them alternative accommodation, and offered them free education for their children for a year. In Terrey Hills, one of our parents had a lease, a 99-year lease on this block of land. They were going to build a nursery, a plant nursery on it, and they offered to transfer the lease to Kinma, which they did. And then later on, when the government changed, they offered people who had 99-year leases the opportunity to buy the property. So Kinma bought the property.
And what was the biggest challenge that you have overcome when setting up the school?
Well, there was a lot of red tape. We had to obviously get council approval for all of the different places we were in. We had to get Department of Education permission. The hardest thing at all was with DOCS, which were the people who licensed the preschool. That was a very difficult situation because you had to comply with a whole lot of regulation, which a lot of the parents didn't really want, but we had to comply with it. So they were probably the main difficulties.
What does the name Kinma mean, and how did you choose it?
Well, there were several progressive schools in Sydney. There was Umbilico and there was Currumbina, both of which ran along similar lines, and they both had Aboriginal names to recognise our culture, I suppose. And so we looked at a whole lot of Aboriginal names and chose one that had a nice sound but also a meaning, which Kinma means awake. And we felt that was a very appropriate name to awake education in young children.
And what was the most important aspect educationally for you when you set up the school?
Well, I was passionate about education. I had a really good educational experience myself, and then when in my training as a teacher, I really believed that if you set up the right environment for children, well then children would learn. Children don't have to be taught to walk, they don't have to be taught to speak, they don't have to be taught to read. If the environment is set up so that they can actually have experience of these things, well then they will learn. Children love learning, and we have to encourage that. So that love of learning was something that we wanted to encourage at Kinma.
So, after 43 years, what's been your proudest moment here at Kinma?
Gosh, that's a hard question. I think, looking back, my proudest moment was when my grandchildren came to Kinma. It was such a wonderful thing to see them come here and to be so happy and joyous.
Yeah.
And it just mirrored what had happened for my own 3 children.
Well, thank you so much, Pam, for talking to us today about Kinma and how it all started. It's been really interesting.
Thank you, Amy, for asking me all the questions.